You going?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I was gonna say make sure you're on mute, but it looks like you've all taken care of that, so thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask me, or you can ping us directly, either Mary or Lisa, and we'll repeat the question out loud and make sure to get you an answer. So thank you for joining. This is the first of 2 co-moderator training sessions. You don't need to participate in both, and we will have a recording to distribute after to all those who are unable to attend in case you have other friends who weren't able to join. So before we get started into exactly what the co-moderator function is, I wanted to give you a broader overview of what the 3 levels of involvement for the Lean In program are. So there are 3 levels of involvement. There are circle members, there are co-moderators, and sponsors. So circle members are the people who attend the monthly meetings, who participate actively during the meeting and contribute their insights and experiences. The circle members are also people who read the distributed materials and prepare questions and opinions before attending the meeting. So these are the people that you are going to be meeting with on a monthly basis from now through either December or January, and you're going to be coordinating with their schedules in order to prepare for the monthly meetings. The co-moderators' 3 main responsibilities are scheduling the monthly circle meetings, the quarterly sponsor meetings, and communicating the agenda, distributing materials ahead of the meetings. In addition, at the monthly meetings, you will be acting as the facilitators to make sure the discussion is moving along and keep track of time to make sure that people are kind of sharing the floor a little bit and make sure that people aren't monopolizing the time. Lastly, there are executive sponsors. So executive sponsors are volunteers who are at the manager level or above who have agreed to meet with circles quarterly in order to provide a more experienced perspective on the issues that you're discussing. So the sponsors will have 2 circles each, more or less 2 circles each, and they'll be having an informal roundtable with both of the circles once a quarter. So the co-moderator role is made up of 3 parts. First, the coordination, so scheduling monthly meetings, booking space to accommodate member schedules. We really hope that people are able to attend all of the monthly meetings. We're aiming for 100% attendance, so we really hope that you're able to find a time that works for the 8 to 10 circle members in your group. Also, you'll be coordinating with the sponsors or the sponsors' assistants to schedule the quarterly meetings and communicating the agenda ahead of the meeting. Second is the facilitation component. So at the monthly meetings, you'll be facilitating the discussion, but also beforehand, you'll be getting a sense of what the circle members want to discuss and what the appropriate structure is to meet the circle members' goals. So in the first meeting, we'll discuss this later on, but we really strongly recommend that you have an open discussion about what people are hoping to get out of the program so that as co-moderators, you can plan out the schedule of what you're going to be talking about when and what the appropriate structure is to really achieve your members' goals. And what you'll find is in these peer groups, I don't know if you attended the kickoff, I think a lot of us realized in the exercise that we did at the kickoff that a lot of us have similar experiences, similar concerns at the specific points of our career, and because you're working strictly with peers, a lot of the concerns that you'll have will overlap. So hopefully you'll see those reoccurring themes, and that'll make your job pretty easy to structure what topics you'll want to cover throughout the program. Lastly, so if there are any conflicts within your circle, we'd ask you to escalate that to the program coordinator, so that's me and Mary, so that we could resolve it if it's necessary to get us involved. And then lastly, if there's any circle level feedback, so if your circle has been discussing ways the program could get better, we would ask that you feed that to the program coordinators as well, so that we can respond to that feedback.
Do you want to stop to see if there's any kind of reactions or questions? I know that the coordination piece can be really challenging with Googler schedules. What I've talked to some co-moderators about is finding one time per month, saying like the first Monday of the month, from noon to 1, let's all make it a priority, even if we can't do it for our first 2 circle meetings. For the last 4 or 5 that we choose to have, let's have it be that so that people can proactively block their calendars. Also, asking maybe some people in your circle, like, hey, can you let us know which meetings on X or Y date are movable? Just because they have a hold on it may not mean that there's no chance that they could participate during that time. So this is a challenge, but it's really important to be able to find a meeting time.
And you could also do it over like lunch, for example, not necessarily in a cafeteria because that's definitely not the right venue, but you can book a conference room, all of you grab lunch and find a place to meet just to have that meeting. It could be an hour long and it's basically just a working lunch, so. Okay, cool. And then lastly, the timeline.
Facilitate and
mention
we're all good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So this is the proposed timeline for the program. So we had our kickoff in May, and we expect that the circle meetings will continue through December or January. And so those monthly meetings will be with the same circle members every month. 2 weeks prior, we recommend, or as Mary suggested, kind of blocking off time in advance, or at least 2 weeks prior, scheduling a time that works with all the circle members and reserving a room. Then a week ahead of the meeting, you'll want to send the circle members the agenda, the discussion topics that you will be the priority for that meeting, and any relevant materials, whether that's an interesting article that you read, an excerpt from a book that you read, an interesting talk that you heard on the radio. Any of those things would be relevant if it's relevant to the discussion. It would be good to distribute it a week before, and then at the meeting you lead the discussion. And then lastly, the sponsor roundtable meetings, like we said, will be once a quarter. We're aiming to have one kind of at the end of Q2, end of Q3, and end of Q4. That's the proposed timeline, and obviously that'll depend on what your sponsor's availability is and what your circle's readiness is. But at the sponsor roundtable, as you mentioned, each sponsor has at least 2 circles. So there's a certain amount of coordination between circles that needs to happen in order to make sure that you are only communicating like the proposed dates work for both circles when you're talking to the admin, and also getting the agenda to the sponsor. And the agenda should really be coordinated as well, because we want all of the circles contributions to be taken into account. So 3 weeks before, we recommend that you meet with the co-moderators of the circles that share your sponsor to set the agenda, and then send the sponsor or admin potential meeting times, and then 1 week before, send the agenda to the sponsor and circle members. And then lastly, on an ongoing basis, we just ask that both you and your fellow circle members add to the discussion topic bank. So we think that there will be a lot of value in sharing across circles, and one of the ways to do that is using the discussion topic bank to share what topics you've discussed in your monthly meetings and how the conversation went. We expect a lot of circles to have some common ground, so it's not only important to share kind of within your circle, but also externally with other circles. And then lastly, we're going to have a lean-in series on our G+ page. And so we're asking for volunteers to share their stories of when they leaned in. And we ask that you kind of promote that within your group. And if you hear a good story during your circle meeting, to encourage that member to share their story online.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm already seeing the challenge of coordinating just my circle. I'm really concerned about that sponsor roundtable that's coordinating 2 circles and like potentially an executive sponsor.
Mm-hmm.
So, I get it. It's like we've got to try it and see how it goes, but I'm not sure that 100% participation is really going to be achievable for that. So one thing that we should factor in is kind of tracking attendance, so that we can see kind of where most groups are hitting, to see, if we need to tweak kind of targets there. But that's going to be really challenging. And also one thing that's not in here is kind of who's responsible for that sponsor roundtable 3 weeks prior. Like, do we just elect among ourselves? Like, you do this one and work as co-moderators it might be useful to kind of have a little bit of more help for that one, or at least an identified owner, because that's going to be a challenging one to schedule.
So for we suggest that there are like 4 co-moderators, like either they can discuss in person or even through email, kind of what are the main topics that have come up during your meetings that you want to discuss with the sponsor. So we'd suggest that you meet in person, but you could also do this virtually if there isn't like a convenient time for all the co-moderators to meet, just so that you have an agenda that really represents what the circles want to discuss and that the sponsor can come prepared with a couple of stories or tips in mind. And then as far as coordinating, totally understand, and I think that you can work closely with the admin to kind of schedule the time. And I think for the busier sponsors, it might just be that the admin predetermines a couple of times that work for the sponsor, and then you just communicate that to your circles. It'll really vary depending on the availability of your sponsor, but I suspect that would be one way it would happen. Just by working with these sponsors ourselves, we've realized that it's sometimes best to lean on the admin to find out what their availability is.
Okay, great, thanks.
And then, just to respond back to the thought about 100% attendance, I think we want to strongly encourage it, just because some of our exec sponsors would really value their time, and I think it would reflect poorly on the pilot if we got very low attendance for the executive sponsor meeting, and that would not encourage them to come back or to share perhaps their stories and their experiences with lead-in circles in the future. So I want to make sure that it's a priority for women, if possible, to rearrange or just show up, but I completely understand people are going to be on vacation, especially for these summer months, and so it's not 100% feasible. So I totally hear you.
Great, thank you.
All right, so I prepared a couple of sample meetings. So the first is going to be a sample circle meeting, so this is just one of the monthlies, and then we have a sample exec sponsor meeting. So we talked about this as much as feasible, 100% attendance, 1 hour. Monthly, and I think we want to lean on the idea of creating and sharing the agenda before, so that women can come to the meeting with some stories in mind that they're comfortable sharing to get the most out of that hour. So we have a couple proposed activities listed. Lisa mentioned case studies, articles, stuff like that you kind of bring in from the outside world that you want to talk about. Another couple of ideas would be icebreakers. There's a million of those on the internet. Topics from our discussion bank. We pulled these discussion topics from Lean In's website and then kind of tried to make them more googly, tried to add Google aspects to them, tried to make it more relevant to the women who we thought would be participating. So I really recommend you peruse those and borrow from them. Another thing that actually my circle did, which I found to be very empowering, was a skills and interest charting. So we added 3 things that we feel we could coach other women on, and then wrote 1 or 2 things that we wanted to be coached on, and trying to match those up. And then if everybody wanted to learn a new skill and nobody felt that they could offer that skill, maybe looking for someone to come in and give a talk about that skill. So I think that could be a very interesting earlier circle meeting to spur some conversation. So looking at the sample agenda, for the first circle meeting, you're going to want to do some intros again. We've only met once, and some circles have not met at all. 20 minutes of topics from the discussion bank, and then perhaps 30 minutes of doing a similar index card activity to the one that we did at the kickoff. If you weren't there, we took blank index cards and we wrote down 3 topics that we'd like to discuss in an anonymous fashion. But doing this again, answering what would you do if you weren't afraid, which is one of the central questions that Cheryl asks in the Lean In book. So submitting those anonymously and then reading them aloud and drawing from that. And then for the last 5 minutes, we recommend doing this every month, doing a roundtable to say, hey, what would you like, what did we not get to that you'd love to have talked about today? What would you love to see at next meeting? What would be a wonderful, challenging activity in your mind that you'd like to experiment with in this group? So this is just some ideas. We don't want you guys to feel like there's no resources available to you. We are here as resources, and we'd love to help in any way possible. All right, executive sponsor meeting. So again, a lot of the same guidelines as before. we talked about that third bullet, working with co-moderators from the other circle to plan and the agenda and schedule the meeting. Scheduling that meeting as early as possible to encourage as much participation and make it as easy as possible for the executive sponsor. We'll send out a link to this, but you can find out who the other circle is. If you look at it's called the co-moderator tricks, lean in co-moderators. There's several tabs there. One of the tabs in that tricks includes which sponsors are assigned to which circles.
I actually just talked to Jennifer over Ping about this, but I will send out emails to introduce the co-moderators that are sharing sponsors so that you guys can get the conversation going, because there's going to be a decent amount of coordination that needs to be done between the co-moderators.
And the goal, when we were assigning sponsors to circles, is to have the circles be somewhat similar. So to have somewhat similar years of experience, or 2 different diverse groups, or 2 different all-tech groups. So it should be really interesting and maybe a great time to do a group activity. Some proposed activities, we really hope and recommend that you would spend the time with your executive sponsor discussing the things that you've kind of hit a brick wall on in your circle. So if you guys have talked about being new moms at Google and the challenges that you face, and you feel like you've started the conversation but haven't quite been able to get to the level of conversation or come to terms or whatever it is that you're looking for, you haven't quite found it yet, that'll be a great thing to talk to them if they're comfortable about that. So providing them with a list of things you've already talked about in meeting that you're struggling with, that you'd really like their advice on, or anything that you know from their history you'd like to hear a little bit more about. Any activity that you would do in your monthly circle meeting would be appropriate with the executive sponsor, we feel. So sample agenda, you see it right there, and we've already discussed this. All right, communication. I know this is a big important piece. We want you guys to all be able to connect, and so we're creating a mailing list, MTV-Comods. I'll be adding everyone after when we send out the recording. We're going to send it to that MTV Comods, and I will add everyone after these 2 sessions. We're going to use this alias to just ping out articles that we find, tips and tricks that we hear, and we'd love you guys to use it as well for the same purpose. And then I've linked the co-moderator tricks there. It lists who the co-moderators are for each circle. So if you want to connect directly to your partner circle or to another circle, all of the communication is available. Additionally, Lisa and I are going to hold some office hours next week. Monday through Thursday, 30 minutes each day. And we recommend that if you feel uncomfortable or if you have any questions for us, you just drop in and we're happy to help create your first agenda with you or whatever is necessary, answer any questions. We will send out an email with those office hours ASAP. All right, guys, so we have another 10 minutes. We wanted to leave this time for questions. Whatever questions you have, I am sure that the other ladies on the call would love to hear the answers to as well. So don't be shy. And then if you have a question you don't feel comfortable asking, or if you have questions that remain after the session is over, feel free to just email leaninmtv@google.com and we will respond to you ASAP. All right, opening up to questions.
One quick question for all of you. Have you been able to see the presentation that we are showing? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
One thing that you could do that would be helpful, right now I feel like the 100% attendance is leaning more heavily on us to kind of ensure it. A really helpful thing would be a reminder out from you guys to all the participants, encouraging them that they need to make this a priority and they need to work with us to shuffle their calendar, because I think there's been a couple edge examples of people resistant to do that. That makes it more challenging for us. So just a reminder to participants that they need to be, supporting that would be helpful.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah, super great feedback. I think that's totally doable.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Can I also ask you where the 100% attendance comes from? I mean, I understand that we want a lot of the women to, us all to get a lot out of it, but I feel like it's one of those things where you get what you put in, and so, if I were a member, I'd feel more comfortable, this is my interest level, or this is what's important to me, and I get to prioritize my own thing versus it's all or nothing. So I was just wondering where that's coming from.
Yeah, it's actually from Cheryl. It's from the book. She said that if you miss, if you're more than 5 minutes late to any 2 meetings, you should be kicked out. So we obviously don't follow that model. She was very firm. She said this should be only an opportunity for women who are kind of dedicated to it. We are not taking that stance by no means. I don't think that's googly at all. But I think it's going to be harder as the circles continue to grow together if someone jumps in after having not been there for several months, or other just choosing a different level of participation. Perhaps this isn't the right time to try in this pilot.
Yeah, I think actually it's really hard to build trust with someone that kind of comes in and out. So when you're sharing so openly in a space, you want to feel like you know the people that you're sharing with, and if someone's like inconsistent, it's like a little bit less reliable that they can actually be trusted with what you're kind of sharing at the circles.
So I have a question. Is it encouraged that we also have a meeting of our circle on the months that we're doing the sponsor meetings? Because it doesn't seem like that's going to be the same thing. It's going to be with 2 big circles and not everyone will have time to speak.
Yeah, the monthly meetings will happen every month, and the sponsor meetings will be in addition to that.
Okay.
That's a great question.
I just got a ping from Lindsay. So she asked if you could create aliases for the circles, like if we would be doing that. I think if you feel that your circle needs that, then you can create you should feel free to create an alias for your circle.
Have any of your circles met yet? That's fine. It's only been just a very short amount of time, so I know there've been a couple that have met just briefly.
We'll be meeting tomorrow. We managed to get that scheduled. One tool that I found very useful, actually, and I don't know if everyone uses, is Doodle, which lets you put together a big poll and you can list all the dates and then just chase everyone to fill theirs in.
That's great. That's awesome feedback. All right, ladies, we want to give you back as much time as possible. So are there any other questions? Okay, feel free to drop off. We'll hang out here for the rest of the time.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
One more question. I just got a ping.